This video was made possible with the help of my amazing Patreon family. If you'd like to get early access to my videos and behind the scenes stuff, please subscribe today. Before I begin this video, I just want to shout out fellow YouTube video essayists Lily Alexander, Verily Bitchy, and Broe Deschanel for their awesome videos on 2010's pop feminism and Barbie that helped inspire this video. Go check out their work if you haven't already. So I finally saw the Barbie movie, and my overall reaction after watching it was that I didn't really like it, and I feel really bad for saying that. It's a fun movie with great set designs, and amazing musical numbers, stellar acting and directing, etc. But I just couldn't help feeling cynical about it in more ways than one. Not only because the studio's main takeaway of the movie's success was to launch a Mattel cinematic universe, but also because of how it went about its feminist message. So much of the film felt like this culmination of 2010's pop feminism, where we have to retroactively fix everything and be self-aware in order to absolve ourselves for liking something with problems, and that if we just work really, really hard on changing people's minds, we can achieve structural and systemic equality. And I wish I could ignore those aspects of Barbie and just enjoy it, but they're integral to the work. And I know this all sounds pretty harsh, right? This is Margot Robbie's passion project after all, and she only got paid $50 million for her role, even though she carried the movie on her back and fought to get it made. At the same time, it seemed like Mattel's CEO Ynon Kreiz kind of had this idea for franchise IP potential already. In 2018, when he came to power, his business ethos was that Mattel had a children's entertainment catalog second only to Disney. Just as Marvel had gone from ailing comic book publisher to Hollywood behemoth, the toy maker could leverage its intellectual property at the multiplex. Kreiz told me, "My thesis was that we needed to transition from being a toy manufacturing company making items to an IP company managing franchises. And here comes Robbie with her passion project, with Greta Gerwig in tow saying they could make Mattel even more money. The timing just couldn't be better." In fact, Kreiz was determined to cast Robbie in the titular role after meeting her following his hiring as CEO, as both he and Robbie Brenner, a film executive brought on by Kreiz, felt that Robbie's appearance resembled that of a conventional Barbie doll and were impressed by her ideas. And overall, as Verily Bitchy said in her video essay, the Barbie movie we got is the best we could hope for when it comes to a Barbie movie under capitalism. A well-disguised ad parading as a film is the only possible outcome when profit is the bottom line.
Mommy, commercial? Son of a bitch.
But honestly, even with that in mind, I still couldn't help but roll my eyes whenever the movie tried to be political, which makes sense considering Mattel has outwardly stated that the movie isn't feminist. Robbie Brenner, one of the female executive producers, told Time that Barbie is not a feminist movie, a belief reportedly expressed by other company execs. When Margot Robbie heard about this, she asked, "Who said that?" Then she sighed and said, "It's not that it is or isn't, it's a movie. It's a movie that's got so much in it." More importantly, the actor said, "We're in on the joke. This isn't a Barbie puff piece." It seems as though nowadays just being in on the joke, lampshading the corporate entity is enough. When really, is it? And though Mattel insists that its films aren't designed to boost toy sales, the corporate synergy is undeniable. Major Matt Mason action figures resurfaced at last year's Comic-Con, and He-Man has returned to toy stores. After Kaluuya's Barney was announced, Mattel, which had inherited rights to the purple dinosaur in an acquisition but never produced any related toys, relaunched the brand. The motivation behind Robbie Brenner's statements is more due to marketing than actually understanding why the film isn't feminist, however. They don't want to alienate a wider audience, so much so that a lot of women I knew didn't even know Barbie was going to discuss feminist talking points and be about quote-unquote girl power. Visually, the film is stunning, the acting and music is great, the last 20 minutes really blew me away, but as a whole, it felt hollow to me. In my opinion, if they just left out the watered-down feminism and self-awareness and focused more on the existentialism and creation myth that we saw towards the end, it would have been so much better. And I know we have to judge movies for what they are rather than what they're not, but based on the trailers and reading I did before the movie, the film I watched barely delivered. Here's how I thought the movie was going to go down based on the teasers, trailers, and research I did. Barbie's changing body, such as her flat feet and cellulite, is due to Mattel changing Barbie due to their brand self-awareness that they're upholding unrealistic beauty standards. Barbie goes to the real world where she protests these changes, but also falls from grace in that she learns about the dissonance of being a woman under the patriarchy. She goes on an adventure where she tries being her girly self and sees how that gets ridiculed, and then decides to give in to Mattel's changes, but then sees how that also doesn't make people happy or make herself happy. She learns that as a woman there's no winning, has her existential crisis, and then she makes the big speech about double standards and inequality, and she tells America Ferrera that she's beautiful. As the film closes, Mattel is able to maintain the status quo in that Barbie decides she prefers being girly, and the lesson is that seemingly quote-unquote ditzy and hyper-feminine women like Barbie deserve respect, similarly to how Legally Blonde teaches us the same thing, that no matter how a woman presents, they're valid, and that's the end. I realize this is more of a script doctor, but honestly, it makes a lot more sense than most of the film, and I personally believe that this can be the only feminist takeaway when your protagonist is a white, thin, blonde woman. And this is a side tangent, and I know this couldn't happen in the real world because brand integrity, but Barbie has so much in common with Dolores from Westworld in that they carry the same themes of what was I made for and how dolls and fembots are fictional examples of how society treats human women, specifically white, blue-eyed, blonde women. I don't know, I just like to imagine Barbie as a psychological Western cowboy thriller sometimes. What actually happens in the film is this. Barbie's sudden thoughts of death and imperfections are because an adult woman is playing with her and projecting negatively onto her. Barbie internalizes these messages and has her existential crisis. Meanwhile, Ken brings the patriarchy to Barbie Land, where they make the women subservient to men. To fix this, Barbie, America Ferrera, and her daughter must deprogram the Barbies by talking some sense into them, making the Kens fight against each other, and thus Barbie Land is restored and the Kens are able to have just as many rights as women in the real world. Along the way, there's a lot of self-aware humor, as if they're trying to preemptively shield themselves from any criticism, like the narrator pauses and says Margot Robbie shouldn't be saying she's not beautiful because she is stereotypically beautiful. There's also a lot of jabs and quips at Gen Z and how woke they are, like the daughter calls Barbie a fascist because that's what kids are into nowadays, I guess. She also polices herself when she says nut job, as if being woke is all performative and that using more politically correct language is a waste of time. I think the part of the movie that really took me out of it was the smallpox comment.
Normative logic that is patriarchy, and they crumbled.
Oh my God, this is like in the 1500s with the indigenous people and smallpox. They had no defenses against it.
Yeah, buckle up, babe.
Like America says the Barbies were brainwashed so easily by the Kens because they had no defense against them or the patriarchy, just like the Native Americans had no defense against smallpox blankets. And this metaphor just makes it seem as though the Native Americans didn't know what was happening to them or fight back when they did. Like, they use this comparison as a lazy explanation as to why the Barbies all go along with the patriarchy, when that doesn't make any sense. Why didn't more of the women fight back? The Native American smallpox thing is not a sufficient explanation. And then the feminist speech is given by Ferrera, and that snaps the quote-unquote brainwashed Barbies out of their trances. And this really harkens back to this idea that was championed in the 2010s during the pop feminist wave, was that if we just change people's minds and talk to them, we could change the world. When no, you can't logic someone out of an ideology that they didn't logic themselves into. We like to believe that people with bigoted ideas just need a little convincing. They just need to hear the other side, when the reason why people uphold systems that go against their own interests is so much more complicated than that. And as good as it is that Barbie is a widely successful film with a feminist message that discusses double standards between men and women, I still think it sucks that we're having the same conversations we've been having since 2014. To argue that Barbie's basic understanding of feminism is good because it introduces young people to the ideology is kind of void in my opinion, because young people today are so much more conscious about social issues. What young person nowadays, like between 13 and 18, let's say, doesn't know what feminism is? The Gen Z insert in the film is heavily versed in politics, for God's sake. They've grown up with the Disney live-action remakes, and the commentary on gender roles in those films are not subtle. I guess the movie could be an introduction to 8-year-olds, but this movie isn't even for kids, it's for women, which makes the argument that Barbie's Feminism 101 is good even more void. I know, it couldn't have been so widely successful if it was more complex, and Mattel would have axed it if they took a radical anti-capitalist stance. We should be happy that a female-centered movie with a basic feminist message is so popular. Why do we hold female-centered films to impossible standards? But maybe we should be holding billion-dollar companies more accountable. And though Barbie's a fun and thought-provoking film at times, I still can't help but be cynical and disappointed. I also dislike Barbieland's emphasis on having jobs and money. Though core to Barbie's ethos, women can do anything, this theme also exposes an integral problem in the brand, at least for me, that Barbie dreams of work, that Barbie can free herself through having a job and spending money. And yes, this is radical in a sense, women should be able to have their own money and spend it as they please, but this also implicitly means that Barbie's main goal is to be a consumer and not change the status quo. They talk so much about working, it almost reaches a parodic degree about how much Americans love to work. Barbie Land as Eden should have been a true garden paradise, not the US, but women. And this brings me to my main point, which is that this is all women's liberation can look like under capitalism. And it's not that great. In fact, I'd say it's pretty bleak. Women's liberation means buying stuff, being consumers, working within the established system, more female CEOs, etc. I talked to my resident young person, aka the Gen Z kid in my family, and she said that though she liked the film, she just wished it was more fun. It felt more like a school lesson than just a movie about Barbie. To end this review on a more positive note, I did really like the ending when Barbie meets God or her creator, and when Ken is allowed to be emotional and cry and we finally get more of the creation myth. If the film was more about that, I could have gotten on board, but too much of it was dedicated to trying to rewrite wrongs that would have been better left unsaid and untouched. We know Barbie didn't fix women's rights, and though funny and proves that the movie doesn't take itself too seriously, in the end, it does feel like a response to bad faith criticism. No serious person expects a toy to solve political issues. As Verily Bitchy says in her video, the movie treats Barbie as if she's a real person, as if we're treating the doll badly and putting too much pressure on her to be perfect, without realizing that there's an entire team of people behind her, and that maybe a multi-billion-dollar corporation should take their responsibility of representing women more seriously. And I too at times have been guilty of talking about Barbie as if she's a real person. I, like America Ferrera says in her speech, believed if we put that much pressure on a representation of a woman, where does that leave human women? But here's the thing that even I forgot. Barbie is a product. And though moralizing toys for girls is annoying, and though Barbie was radical at the time for giving girls a different role than mother and being a fully mature adult woman, how dare she have boobs, oh the horror, that progressiveness soon gets lost when we see how aggressive the brand is. Not only with trying to hop on the bandwagon of pop feminism with girl purr, but also not treating their overseas workers fairly. So much for girl bossing. And though again, I can see the argument that isn't it great that this movie is so popular showing how women have box office power too, that's not the lesson the studio took away. Instead, they decided to launch the Mattel Cinematic Universe full of dark and gritty movies about toys, aka IP. And in the bleak 2020s media landscape, this isn't even a risk for them, unlike how it was for Hasbro, which was relentlessly mocked for their Toy Cinematic Universe idea in 2008. In 2008, a year after the release of Michael Bay's Transformers, Hasbro struck a 6-year deal with Universal, which secured the film rights to a grab bag of other toys and games, including Monopoly and Candyland. The arrangement was mocked relentlessly in the press. Would Russell Crowe land the role of Uncle Pennybags, the mustachioed man, on the chance cards? Mattel had apparently learned from Hasbro's misadventure by partnering with a range of studios and enshrining a series of timed development gates in each contract. If the creative team that Mattel assembles doesn't deliver it and quickly, it can be disbanded, allowing the toy maker to move on. And maybe these future Mattel movies will be artsy and deep and meaningful. But do we really want to live in a world where the human experience is mainly told through already existing IPs and dictated by multi-billion-dollar companies just trying to sell you something? I had high hopes for Barbie because of Greta Gerwig specifically. Gerwig was brought on by Margot Robbie, and she is known for her introspective feminist films like Lady Bird and Little Women, honestly some of my favorite movies in the past decade, but clearly she shows how one individual can't change the system. And I feel really naive in believing that she would bring something more radical to a film about toys. In the end, Barbie is the pinnacle, the only logical conclusion and culmination of the pop feminism of the 2010s. It pulls a Disney and says, we know we're problematic and a big multi-billion-dollar corporation, but actually Barbie is feminist and self-aware, and corporations are people too. Now I want to talk a little bit about the ramifications of 2010's pop feminism, as while I was watching Barbie, I was reminded so much of that time online. So fourth wave feminism has been documented as starting in the 2010s and defined by its internet presence, online activism, and awareness campaigns. But before the 2010s corporate embrace of feminism, independent feminist bloggers were sowing the seeds for the greater movement, because at the time, as Jamila Lemieux of the blog Beautiful Struggler said, nobody was fucking with it. She was, though, and so were a whole bunch of incoming bloggers, including LaToya Peterson, the editor of Racialicious. As Peterson said in Jezebel's 2019 article, How the Internet Killed Feminism, I think it's really hard to capture that sense of, I would say, almost heady rebellion. Feminist was the first of 5 major feminist blogs to arrive in 2001. Feministing, Shakesville, Pandagon, and Jezebel followed. Feminist creator Lauren Bruce lived in Indiana and was putting herself through college while raising a child she had as a teen. Here I was, having suffered some of the consequences of being sexually available in a world that hates women. In fact, I was made aware of feminism through online discourse in the early 2010s, through Francesca Ramsey, Anita Sarkeesian, Lacey Green, Lindsay Ellis, etc. I distinctly remember binge-watching Feminist Frequency, and it was just so good. It was amazing being given the vocabulary to my own thoughts and feelings. And though feminist discourse online was helpful, there were of course problems, specifically due to the nature of capitalism and the internet. It's hard to make radical feminist online content when you have to reach a certain number of views and clicks per month to pay the bills. So a lot of online feminist discourse had to water down the issues, make them clickable, relatable, and less threatening. Within the blogosphere, feministing was side-eyed for watering things down, getting things wrong, not being inclusive, and even appropriating other bloggers' work. Outside of it, the blog was known as the Feminism 101 site and Jessica Valenti, the #1 feminist blogger. That meant bylines in mainstream publications like The Guardian and The Nation, and book after book. Other non-white feminist bloggers were pushed aside to make way for more white women and race-neutral feminist issues because they're just more relatable. The feminist blog Reappropriates Jen Fang referred to the balkanization of the feminist blogosphere from the beginning, where the standard was an upwardly mobile, white coastal community that had limited self-awareness. They were like, let's have feminism as a race-neutral conversation, she said. That meant refusing to engage when they were asked to examine their privilege. And even in the 2010s, when acknowledging and owning up to one's privilege became part of the conversation, it wasn't very helpful. As Esme Chonara and Yuri Prasad wrote in their 2014 essay, What's Wrong with Privilege Theory tends to reduce political arguments to moral appeal and personal feelings, in which who is saying something often becomes more important than what they are saying. This is one reason that the notion of privilege is potentially corrosive to debate and actually risks letting oppressive behavior off the hook. The focus on trying to change ideas in ourselves and others before a meaningful challenge to wider structural inequalities is possible in getting things the wrong way around. In the end, pop feminism, online feminist work that is made to get clicks and appeal to the masses, creates an offshoot reduction of feminism where it's no longer an anti-capitalist ideology centering on community action, but how patriarchy makes us feel, sexist double standards, and our choices, and insists that simply raising awareness and having conversations can and will change things. What irks me the most about pop feminism is how it devolved into choice feminism, and by doing so, helped to absolve and center white thin cishet women of their privileged identities. Any choice you make is feminist, so you don't need to do or change anything about yourself because that's what feminism is. As Lily Alexander pointed out, Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead, then Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg's 2013 book about women in the workplace, mainly caters to rich white women who already wield power in society. The ethos is let's make wealthy women more wealthy. How is that feminist? And when she received backlash for her book about how it offers little to no advice for working class women of color, the criticism was deemed invalid because she's a woman and these are her choices, and therefore this reduction of feminism being about how we feel as women and our choices became a shield from criticism. It's suddenly not feminist to point out how a woman benefits from white supremacy. It's anti-feminist to question her intentions to become even wealthier and offer little help to working women. Any life choice is feminist as long as you're a woman. Ali Sanvia actually has a great video about choices and autonomy and how our choices aren't always our own. How a lot of the times rich white women can't understand why working class women of color have to subject themselves to horrible working conditions and instead deem them brainwashed. And if they just knew about feminism, they could will themselves out of their oppression without realizing that lower class women don't have the same options, and that in fact, it's lower class women who are more conscious of their limited choices and their gendered oppression. This is all to say that feminism isn't about choices, because then anyone could call themselves and their actions feminist, even when it goes against feminist ideology. This culminated in many ways online, from the backlash against Not Like Other Girls to the defense of Sharpay Evans, with the likes of Sharpay as a victim. Not Like Other Girls faced ridicule in pop feminism because they were painted as not in solidarity with other women and desperate for male attention, internalizing the patriarchy, etc., when in reality they were demonized for just deviating from what was expected from them as women. However, a reevaluation of Not Like Other Girls or N-Logs and how they were treated was discussed in more nuance by the likes of Sarah Zed, for instance. In the vein of this Not Like Other Girls backlash, there was the Sharpay Evans is a victim, when in reality she's firstly not a real person, and secondly very much a villain in the actual HSM franchise. It's fair to critique how hyper-feminine women are villainized in the media by writers and studios, but it's also equally important to note that fans are more likely to rally around and protect a character like Sharpay because she's a thin white woman. Not to mention that real rich white thin women who she's based on a lot of the time are real-world villains who weaponize their own privilege and femininity, who are given all the benefit of the doubt, etc. Under choice feminism, there's a lack of acknowledgement of the female hierarchy, which leads to disingenuous feminism. There was a heavy focus on microaggressions during this time as well, because that commonplace sexism is more relatable to the wider populace, like men telling you to smile more, wear makeup, or manspreading or mansplaining, etc. And though all women face degrees of sexism, we don't all experience sexism equally. But these general microaggressions are applicable to all women, and more specifically white women, who are least likely to be aware of their own privilege due to white hegemony. And though I guess it's good that more white women wanted to join the feminist movement because they were able to relate to it more easily and see how it could benefit them, I also think by creating race-neutral conversations and catering feminism to white women made it look to outsiders as no big deal and kind of pointless. Basically, this offshoot of feminism made feminism easier to make fun of. By focusing on verbal microaggressions and other general forms of sexism surrounding white women to get clicks, it made it seem like we weren't really fighting for much because white women already have a ton of privilege and rights. To outsiders, they saw all of this and asked, what's the big deal? Really? You're upset about manspreading? This is why I roll my eyes at the Taylor Swift's The Man music video, which is also a culmination of pop feminism because she's a white woman. Her fight is very different from the fights of non-famous working women of color. The song still slaps though. This era is also when we get things like the rise in the Handmaid's Tale inspired protests and later TV adaptation. Plenty have already criticized the work for basically being dystopian fantasy for white women, like what if slavery happened but to white women, ignoring the fact that black women and indigenous women were enslaved and continued to face sexual assault at rates incomparable to white women. White women do face misogyny, but the simple talking points espoused by pop feminism catered more to emotions, how individuals act, and not about more complex structural issues about inequality, which outsiders are more likely to take seriously. Without the focus being on marginalized women, it doesn't seem like feminism has too much to do but complain about men, bemoaning the word history without realizing that it's a Latin word that has nothing to do with English pronouns. Heck, even the rape revenge movie Promising Young Woman believed the police would save the day. Honing in on race-neutral issues that only affected privileged white women not only made feminism less political, it also made it easier for corporations to get on board. More female CEOs. Look at the green M&M. She's wearing sneakers. Body inclusivity. See, we care. Now buy our products. 2014 is when we get the Always Super Bowl ad Like a Girl for menstrual products, and a year before in 2013 we got Dove's forensic drawings of how you're not a grumpy looking wrinkled woman, you're a soft beautiful angel. 2014 also was the first year of the Airy Real campaign, where they decided to leave their models' bodies and photos unedited. And this isn't to say that, corporate decisions to sell girl power merch is necessarily bad or that advertisements can't be powerful, but that feminism is more than representation. But in the end, that's the only way brands can find a way to profit off the movement. Disney would later hop on the bandwagon with their most valuable product, the Disney princesses. Look, you don't need to feel guilty for liking Disney princesses. They're feminist. Watch our live-action remakes. Choice feminism led to this weird trend where we started moralizing our habits, specifically our media habits, which we'll get into the next section, where everything you consumed had to be feminist for some reason. See this Onion article for more details. Lastly, pop feminism again led to thin white women being centered because they just generate more money and again have more racial privilege. Along with the rise of online feminism rose plenty of thin white female influencers and entrepreneurs who continue to get more fame and opportunities than their peers. There were the D'Amelio sisters, Emma Chamberlain, Addison Rae, Kylie Jenner, the Call Her Daddy podcast hosts, and now this other blonde white podcaster who exclusively interviews black celebrities. Why? This isn't to say that all feminism of the 2010s was bad, and in fact, a lot of good was being done, and intersectionality is a huge point of fourth wave feminism. But in online spaces, talking points that appealed more to white, wealthy, thin women with buying power were pushed to the forefront. And so far, in this current decade of the 2020s, I think we're seeing the ramifications and pitfalls of the 2010s feminist movement, at least here in the US. Currently, there's a legion of anti-trans bills being passed and voted on, not to mention Roe versus Wade being overturned, and the reality is things are just very depressing right now. And though some progress was made in awareness raising, that alone won't lead to systemic or structural changes. But back in the 2010s, I was guilty too of believing that any choice we made, as long as we made it consciously, could be feminist. But nowadays, I believe that as women, we won't always make feminist choices, and that's okay. We live in a society. Feminism isn't about our individual choices, but our actions and beliefs, and I think more of us aren't doing what we learned from that era.
Not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
I could literally write a PhD thesis on the pseudo-feminism that is criticizing Disney princesses. All you're doing is criticizing women for things that men get to do unquestioned and denying them their right to be or fall in love.
So I said most of us, right? Hear me out. It's not anti-feminist to criticize Disney princesses. Critiquing fictional female characters is okay. And I bring up Disney princesses here specifically because, as Verily Bitchy pointed out in their video, Disney really did popularize the trend of a studio looking through their IP and trying to make their art more politically aligned with today's views in order to prove that their brand is self-aware and that you as a woman don't need to feel ashamed for buying our products because they're feminists, see? In addition, Mattel's own CEO compared their IP catalog to Disney's, saying that they only come second to the mouse when it comes to the amount of valuable intellectual properties they have. And Mattel ended up taking a page out of Disney's book with Barbie. They used Barbie as a chance to comment on their own brand and prove that they're self-aware too. We know we've got problems, but by choosing to buy and support our products, you're supporting feminism too, because that's what feminism is. Buying and consuming. Recently, Disney's Snow White remake has been in the works, and Rachel Ziegler, who will play Snow White, said recently that basically it's not 1937 anymore. Snow White isn't a damsel in distress, she is a leader. And this comment that's just, there to describe the basis of the film to get audiences excited was met with so much backlash. Yara Zaid did a video recently dissecting the conversation in more detail that you should definitely go watch. I personally believe that this visceral attack of Ziegler reflects how little 2010s pop feminism discourse really did when it came to having productive conversations about female representation in media. A lot of early 2010s online pop feminist content was about how problematic Disney princesses were, specifically from then content giant BuzzFeed. They complained about how Ariel gave up her voice for a man, how Belle has Stockholm Syndrome, how Cinderella doesn't do anything, etc. And unsurprisingly, this content was extremely clickable and popular, so much so that a billion-dollar corporation like Disney felt the need to make meta-commentary in their live-action remakes to right the wrongs of their forefathers. Walt Disney wasn't woke? Who knew? This wasn't the first time the studio was called out by the public for being problematic, or the first time the messages they were sending children, specifically girls, were put into question. But it was the first time millions of people started to give them the side eye, scratch their heads and think, maybe those angry feminists are right. The pop feminist content was able to get across the message that female representation matters in a catchy way, more so than a journal article or a documentary ever could. And though in general raising awareness is good, it ended up reducing the argument about representation into simple catchphrases, which gained unprecedented popularity that led to multitudes of bad faith criticism. And though Disney commented on itself before with the likes of Enchanted and Frozen, this was the first attempt to wink at the camera about their older works in a very literal way, as they were remaking the same movies that the public deemed as problematic. And like Lindsay Ellis said in her Woke Disney video, what the remakes choose to comment on aren't any criticisms real people actually had. Because if they did want to comment on racism in Dumbo, for example, they'd actually have to admit that they did something wrong. So they just make the girl child an aspiring scientist instead. Rather than exploring Shang's bisexuality or Mulan's gender identity, they make her a girl boss. And the same with Jasmine. Now she wants to be the Sultan, and she won't be silent, except for the whole part of the movie where she's silenced. But the internet moves fast, and soon pop feminism's pendulum swung in the other direction as fans of older Disney stories came out in their defense. Actually, the Disney princesses are feminist and not problematic, and you're anti-feminist for critiquing them. There was the Take's extremely popular video about Cinderella being a victim of abuse, and how feminists saying she doesn't do anything is victim blaming actually. And Lindsay Ellis's videos about Beauty and the Beast, and how actually they're in love, and we don't know how long they're in the castle for. Not to mention how the original story of Beauty and the Beast was written by a woman to help young girls cope with arranged marriages, so it's been feminist, or at least fine, all along. And soon it became popular to defend Disney princesses and say, in fact, they were feminist and good all along. The Disney princess remakes waned in popularity because people realized that the originals, though problematic, were products of their time. Not to mention, most of the remakes really suck. But this Cinderella and Belle discourse, though helpful, I think swung the pendulum too hard. Not that that was these videos' intentions. But now it's like we can't have any nuanced discussions of the Disney Princess franchise because they're feminist, actually. The Beast isn't an abusive asshole keeping Belle locked up. They actually love each other. Cinderella not doing anything in the film makes sense, actually, because she's being kept as a prisoner. The movie was progressive all along. Rather than having balanced discussions of how it's okay to like things with more pernicious aspects, we had to constantly use feminism or pop feminism talking points to defend them. This isn't to say that bad faith criticism doesn't exist, and I actually think that was what these videos were responding to. But audiences who like Disney princesses and didn't want to be seen as bad for liking them took this content and ran as far as they could with it to defend their own interests. But I think what we forget a lot of the time, and even I'm guilty of this, is that the Disney princesses aren't real people, they're fictional. Barbie, of course, falls into this category as well. She's not a real person. She's an object, a product. They don't make choices. They're not real. There's a multi-billion-dollar studio behind them, and their main goal is to be a product to make money. And more importantly, they're products of their time, and we should acknowledge that. Their job was and is to uphold the status quo, not rock the boat, and to keep rich people rich and keep us buying. That's not to say that they don't have, a cultural or emotional impact, because they obviously do, but rather when we critique the actions of Disney princesses or any fictional female character, we have to remember that they're not autonomous human beings, they're vessels for studios to espouse their beliefs, and again, solely exist to make money. And if they make little kids happy, that's just an added bonus. As Michael Eisner, the Disney CEO who oversaw the Disney Renaissance, once said, "We have no obligation to make art, we have no obligation to make a statement, to make money is our only objective." I think the most productive way we can discuss Disney princesses and fictional female characters in general is to be okay with the fact that they're not always feminist. Not everything you as a woman will consume is or will be feminist, and that's okay. Not all of your choices and actions are feminist, and that's okay too. Pop feminism really warped our views about our personal consumption habits needing to be morally right when no, they don't. Choice feminism made us moralize our own choices when in the end, That's a really futile way to take part in a collectively political movement. Fiction isn't morally upstanding. It's a place to indulge ourselves, and that's okay. Art doesn't exist for moral instruction or to make you feel good about your own moral character. It exists to challenge us, to entertain us, to help us make sense of our own lives. And to bring this back to Barbie, though it was entertaining and fun to watch, it wasn't feminist as much as it wanted to be. It wasn't, and I guess that's fine. As long as we stop pretending it was, I think I could say I enjoyed it a little bit more. I know I spent most of this video shitting all over Barbie, and if you got this far and if you thoroughly enjoyed the movie, I'm happy for you. I honestly found myself smiling through most of the movie and laughing to myself. It was nice seeing a non-franchise film and practical effects again. The images we consume are extremely powerful, and it feels good to see marginalized women being represented on screen, even if a thin white blonde woman is the main character. I even think it's important to note how Barbie doesn't end up with Ken, how she's not a sexualized being, how she's able to gain her autonomy, and how the film makes commentary on how one doll, one woman, will never change the world. I also am in awe of the film's success and happy to support Margot Robbie. But I think it's also important to keep in mind how billion-dollar corporations can make a difference. They can stop hoarding wealth, treat their workers fairly, stop killing the environment, but choose not to because they put profits first. Seeing Barbie's success was kind of like when I saw Kamala Harris become the first female vice president of the US. It's amazing to me and so important for girls to see that image, but at the same time, it's kind of like that, we didn't do anything Joe meme. Roe versus Wade was overturned with a female vice president in office. Not that it's, Harris's fault, but it just goes to show that though images and representation are important, it's not going to fix anything when the system itself is broken. In the end, Barbie is the pinnacle of choice in pop feminism, and I guess that's all it was destined to be under the current system, and I think I was naive in thinking it could be something else. I'm scared for what the future holds when it comes to the future of movies solely being made on whether they can move product. But I guess that's sadly all we could again hope for under capitalism, where profits come before storytelling, where upholding the status quo with pop feminist platitudes is seen as enough. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please, give it a like, comment, share with someone, and go to my Patreon to help support the channel if you feel compelled to do so. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.